Major funding for Florida Matters comes from the Mosaic Company, a leading producer of fertilizer made from phosphate, a natural resource found in Florida. America's farmers depend on Florida phosphate for their crop nutrition needs. Mosaic, helping America grow.
Stories that connect us to people and places are the cornerstone of Larry Ellistons Florida Stories. Join us as Larry revisits more of his favorite Florida stories from this season of Florida Matters.
Freedom, redemption, and good health. Hi, I'm Larry Elliston with another collection of Florida stories. People find their way to Florida for every reason under the sun. The great weather, retirement, a fresh start, freedom. East of Tampa, two kids at play in a Florida suburb. 8-year-old Samantha Garritex and her brother, 6-year-old Andrew. Maybe the only conflict they know in their young lives, who can keep the ball longer.
Pass the ball back.
Samantha and Andrew are a generation far removed from a world in which their own parents grew up. Ernie and Yvette were college sweethearts. Born in Miami, both are first-generation Cuban Americans whose own childhoods centered on parents who fled their island homeland and the reign of Fidel Castro. Tonight, Ernie's sister, Marilyn Garritex, has stopped by for dinner.
He couldn't get the bag open.
Dinner conversation was mostly about school.
He's tiny.
Unlike the days when Ernie and Marilyn and Yvette were kids, there was no talk around the table of Cuba. But Aunt Marilyn doesn't want her niece and nephew to forget the hardships once faced by their grandparents or the pursuit in America of their hopes and dreams. So as a journalist for the St. Petersburg Times, Marilyn wrote about her own experience growing up with Fidel Castro. Her personal essay was written a year ago. It still rings true.
50 Years of Fidel in My Family by Marilyn Garritex. Back in Cuba, the sky was brighter. Back in Cuba, the grass was greener. Back in Cuba, the flowers were prettier. My siblings and I grew up hearing that phrase constantly. There was one and only one thing that wasn't great back in Cuba, Fidel Castro. I have never met the man, but he has been a never-ending presence in my life. My parents, grandparents, and other adults in my family despised him. They had to adapt to a new country while mourning the loss of their homeland, to a revolution they vehemently opposed. And they blamed Fidel for everything. When I was a child, he was the boogeyman. When I was a teenager, he was the reason I didn't know my uncles, aunts, cousins in Cuba. When I was a college student, he became the center of political discussions with my father. And when I became a journalist, he was the focus of bad newspaper stories written by people who didn't understand Fidel and what he had done. At least that's what my father said. I'd explain that the stories were striving to present the facts and allow people to judge for themselves. Papi was never swayed. He had one response. He's Fidel.
Marilyn's father, Erasmo, was born in the countryside of Camagüey province, and her mother, Sylvia, in Havana. Though engaged in their beloved Cuba, the young couple would marry in Miami.
Fidel's 1959 revolution divided my father and his 11 siblings, pitting brother against brother. My father acknowledges that the army wasn't perfect, but to him, Fidel's politics were far worse. His father, a country judge, died in jail. My father has hinted at being jailed himself, but won't say more than that. He eventually escaped and was the first to arrive in Miami in April 1960. My mom, who worked for an American cargo company, smuggled him aboard a departing ship to Key West. She followed a few months later, arriving on the American company's last ship out of Cuba. U.S.-Cuban relations chilled to a deep freeze shortly after. My parents were married in November 1960 with only 2 family friends as witnesses. Many and their families eventually arrived on the Freedom flights that brought thousands to the United States. My father's older brother's younger sister, however, remained in Cuba. It is hard for me to imagine the courage it took to leave home for a strange land. As a journalist, I was in a Coast Guard cutter reporting on the 1994 exodus Fidel allowed that had Cubans jumping on rafts. Whether in the end they did it for political reasons or economic reasons, every time a Cuban was pulled from the sea, I thanked my parents. Moments like that and my father's stories helped me understand that their obsession with Fidel stems from an emotional and personal place. My parents would like us to despise Fidel with the same passion. Perhaps some in my generation do, but my brother, sister, and I will never experience what our parents did. We can only respect it, try to put ourselves in their shoes, and support it in our own way. Everything is Fidel's fault.
But as little Andrew made the weekly phone call to his grandparents, still living in Miami after 50 years,
Hello.
it was quickly apparent that conversation between the three Garritex generations was not about the past. Like their father and Aunt Marilyn before them, Andrew and Samantha are being introduced to Cuban culture, but it's different.
My niece and nephew, however, don't know who Fidel is. My father rarely talks about him in their presence. As with us, he is reluctant to share the painful memories. Papi, ¿cómo estás? My generation is Cuban-American, but my niece and nephew are perhaps more American-Cuban.
Hi, abuelo.
How are you?
Good.
¿Está bien?
Sí.
Muy bien,
¿Cómo está? Bien, bien.
Though Marilyn and Ernie didn't experience the pains of Cuba firsthand, they lived it through parents who did.
And though we want to keep that, living memory for them, it's also tough as, especially with my children and the next generation, how it becomes further apart, and they don't really understand, Fidel and what Fidel did to the country.
So we're sort of caught between sort of the past and the future. The future is, generations who will probably know less about Fidel and less about what's happened in Cuba, but the past remains strong, and those of us who are in between and are really the link in between those two generations.
But they do see the benefits, and they do see, the best parts of Cuba, and, the livelihood as far as all the work ethic that my parents has brought over and done, and the good parts about our traditions and family and the food and all the good times.
An ailing Fidel Castro retired as president in February 2008, only to be succeeded by his brother Raul. But the legacy of Fidel still looms. Marilyn Garritex envisions a time when the bearded Cuban dictator will no longer be a part of family conversations, but she's certain Fidel Castro will always be a presence in her life. You see, Marilyn and Fidel both share the same birthday, August 13th. Immigration has made Florida one of the most culturally diverse states in the nation. It's a distinction to be proud of. And in the years to come, we can expect Florida to become even more diverse.
We have here the check also to cover for the rent, utilities, and also the pocket money for the refugees when they arrive tonight. Okay.
Lourdes Macias is going over the last-minute details for the arrival of one of Florida's newest families.
Is all the furniture already in the truck?
Yeah,
the
truck. And the food is going to be ready when they arrive.
Ong Tain knows how special this day is. 2 years ago, he arrived in Florida as a refugee himself. Ong is from Burma, the Southeast Asian country crippled for decades by a repressive military regime. Though rich in resources, armed conflict and a political stalemate has left Burma one of the poorest countries in the world. Ong Tain works for Lutheran Services Florida. Though he's often the first person to welcome refugees from around the world to their first taste of freedom, tonight's assignment has extra meaning.
When they meet me and when I welcome them with their language, like with Burmese language, they just get surprised, and all their stress goes down.
But before he heads to TAP International to greet the family of three, Ong is on his way to their new apartment with a truckload of furniture.
To the Tampa Bay area, we are going to be helping this year around 413 refugees.
Statewide, Lutheran Services Florida will assist more than 800 refugees. Coordinated through the United Nations and the U.S. State Department, LSF extends a helping hand to immigrants escaping political repression and personal danger.
All my dreams will come true.
Whether they come from Iraq, like Mohammed Al-Jareed, or from Cuba, their goal is the same. They want to become U.S. citizens. They vote for freedom.
I think this country is built on refugees.
11 years ago, Lourdes Macias, U.S. citizen, was a refugee from Cuba. 2 years ago, Ong Tain, now a legal resident, was a refugee from Burma.
We have freedom here and democracy, so we have opportunity to be whatever we want to be. So this is the main opportunity for us.
With the kitchen in order, and the beds made, and a final adjustment to the dollhouse, it was time.
Free, like a river, flowing free and through infinity. To be sure of.
At Tampa International, Ong Tain waited for the passengers to deplane. He was looking for someone carrying a large white bag marked International Organization for Migration.
When we see that, so we are sure that they are refugees and that we are expecting.
The IOM bag is unmistakable. The family from Burma had arrived from Newark by the way of Kuala Lumpur. They had fled to safety in Malaysia, awaiting admission to America. Ong welcomed 99 Zatun, his wife Mimi Zon, and their 6-year-old daughter Susu. Hearing those first words spoken in Burmese was a comfort. Lourdes' first words in English, surely a dream come true.
Welcome to the United States. Hello here. How are you?
When 99 Zatun entered his new apartment, other Burmese refugees, also resettled in Tampa, warmly welcomed him and his family. For the next 120 days, Lutheran Services Florida will help this family adjust to a new country, a new culture.
And it takes time, but they get it.
Away from the military that once jailed this former coffee shop owner, away from the violence and repression that once controlled his every move, what were 99 Zatun's thoughts about the future on this, the very first day in Tampa, Florida, United States of America?
What are your dreams, your hopes and dreams?
They hope for the future for their daughter, and she can get the good education, and there's no afraid, no fears from the government or military or police. So they have freedom, so she can get the good future. They just dream for her.
From our worries, worries prey on oneself's troubled mind.
Immigration energizes Florida. The new arrivals bring with them the hopes and dreams they will invest in a new country, a new community. As they energetically build life afresh, they share with all of us their own unique talents, culture, and undying belief in a better future. Freedom and Florida just seem to go together. I mean, what a place to live out your dreams. But sometimes on those paths we travel, we hit a few detours. The inside of a jail cell is something this man knows all about. His time behind bars totaled 10 years. For 34-year-old Tyrone Summerall, it all began here on Grapefruit Avenue in Lake Alfred.
I mean, that's what went on. Crime, crime, crime.
Tyrone was just 8 years old.
My mom tried to provide 7 kids, 1 mom, no dad, and she wanted to do much for us but didn't have the means to. And so a lot of times I used to feel like left out. A lot of kids getting Christmas presents, we didn't. A lot of kids having bicycles, we don't. And so we just said we're gonna get everything we wanted however we had to.
It began with a break-in to steal a piece of cake, and then Tyrone and his brothers hit the school down the street.
Because we thought something valuable was in there, and we just had no regards for anything.
Schooled in the ways of crime, Tyrone and his brothers were just getting started.
It went from a level of sneaking type stealing to boldness in taking. That boldness led to picking up a gun and doing armed robberies.
In the small Polk County town of Lake Alfred, population 4,000, Summerall was a household name with police.
A lot of times they were committing some serious crimes within the community, and a lot of times it made it kind of tough. And sometimes it didn't make it so tough because depending on what the crime was, a lot of times we pretty well knew who was probably behind it.
Armed robbery, aggravated assault, grand theft, home invasion. Tyrone's crime spree seemed to have no end.
Over 1,000. I can tell you that. It came to a point where we was doing a crime every day, multiple crimes every day. I mean, and it's just like I couldn't rest unless I did a crime. One of them, the one that got in trouble with me, got sentenced to 52 years. And it's just like, we came to a point that whatever that we set our mind that we wanted, it was nothing could stop us. No burglar alarm, it was not one thing that could stop us.
And then one day, sitting in the county jail in Bartow, something happened to Tyrone.
As I read the Bible, I just felt it was something in there pulling at me. And then when I realized that God still loved me despite what I done and that he was willing to accept me, that changed my life.
Tyrone's epiphany came 8 years ago. Since then, he's gone straight. His new devotion to doing right, not wrong, has changed his life. There was a time when Tyrone Summerall's presence at the Lake Alfred police station meant Chief Art Bodenheimer had taken him into custody once again. Stopping by on a social call would have been unimaginable.
Hello, how you doing?
Hey, Tyrone, how you doing?
I'm doing good.
Good to see you today.
Good
Have
seeing
a seat,
you.
let's talk. You know, I knew you were going to come in today, so I know how things have been going pretty well, but I'm just thinking back on some of the things over the years, and I went and I printed this out today, and I know you probably don't remember all this, but that's actually your criminal history from back in the day. So, how's everything been going?
It's been going great.
With a busy lawn care business, a moving company, and a family with 2 kids, Tyrone Summerall seems determined to put his criminal past behind him. He even shares his previous mistakes with young teens, hoping to keep them from going astray like he did.
I come and help them with their homework if they want to, try to work out with them, and just try to get them to believe in themselves that you can do right just as well as, you know, as they are doing wrong. You can do right, and right is good.
With his own children, 5-year-old Tyrone and 4-year-old Michaela, Summerall and his wife Lisa intend to raise their kids with the strength of a family.
You know, one parent can only do so much, and some single parents do a great job, but that's not the design for a family. We always loved our dad and wanted him to be there. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. He used to drive semi-trucks, And I used to sit on the side of the highway and look to see if I can see him. And, you know, it bring tears to my eyes, but, you know, I desired my dad to be there with me, you know.
I understand. Well, I'm glad you came up and saw me today. If you ever need anything, come by and see me. Okay. All right. I appreciate what you're doing in the community. Okay, thanks.
Polk County Sheriff Grady Judd, who supports faith-based training among inmates, says the only way to change criminal behavior is to change from the inside out.
Tyrone is an example of what he was and what he is now. And he can say, I was there, and now I'm not. And here's how I changed, and here's how my life is better. And here's how you can have a better quality of life as well. We appreciate Tyrone.
If you don't want to show your teeth, you just smile at him.
There's a lot to smile about. Tyrone seems to have found his road to redemption. When you think of Florida, so many images come to mind. The beach, palm trees, alligators, oranges, health and vitality. Dr. Bob.
7, 8, reverse, high kicks, all count, 1.
An early morning exercise class at a Florida mobile home park.
5, 6.
These retirees at Ranchero Village in Largo know physical fitness is the way to look, feel, and do your best. One resident, Bob Stubbins, came to that conclusion years ago. Trim and fit and full of energy, Dr. Bob Stubbins is a true believer that exercise really is a prescription for good health. So it's not uncommon for this retiree, 85 years young, to end one workout only to start another. Logging nearly 100 miles a week on a bicycle is pure bliss.
Well, I'm on the road again, doing what I like best. I belong to about 3 different bike clubs, and this is the life. If I don't get biking, I'm going to slump down, and I got to keep going, and I love it.
In his younger years, Stubbins was a prairie doctor out in the wide open spaces of Canada's Saskatchewan province. At the 8-bed hospital in the small village of Bingoff, Dr. Bob, as he was known, did it all, even dentistry. And of course, everybody knew where he lived.
Nobody had locked their doors there, and so patients, if they needed you in the middle of the night, would walk in and go into your bedroom and shake you. Doc, are you busy? We need you.
And even though this doc is retired now from private practice in Toronto, he's still busy seeing patients.
It's Nancy.
Dr. Stubbins is a volunteer physician at the Clearwater Free Clinic.
How would you like to sit up on the table? And I graduated 60 years ago, and I guess you get a little warped. You work, you see patients, you love it, and never want to stop. And coming into the free clinic is almost like practicing in Bengal.
Here, patients like Nancy Weichel come to know and depend on medical professionals like Bob Stubbins. It's almost like a family.
Yeah, it's just there.
But unlike Bingoff, where residents are covered by a national health care program, those who come to the Clearwater Free Clinic have no health insurance.
I can't really afford it because my husband passed away a couple of years ago, and I'm trying to make it on my own, and you know, it's just, I can't really afford it.
Weichel doesn't know what she would do without the clinic. The director of this clinic, which is supported solely by donations, doesn't know what she would do without volunteers like Dr. Stubbins.
Did they come in with the report?
Dr. Stubbins is a gem. He has been a staunch supporter of the free clinic. He's been more than willing to come 4 days a week when he was needed.
How are you today?
We look forward to having him join us in November when he comes back from Canada, and we're sad to see him go in April when he leaves. So he's an integral part of what we do here. and he's quite a character.
Thank goodness this place is here because I do work, but we do not have insurance coverage.
Have you been taking anything at home for the cough?
No, just trying to take extra vitamin C. So
Chicken soup and
chicken soup, yes.
Well, I'm going to start you on an antibiotic.
If only the current economic downturn and rising unemployment had such an easy cure. Since October 2008, demand for services at the Clearwater Free Clinic has increased by nearly 200 new patients a month. For Dr. Stubbins, this packed waiting room is the reason to serve.
Well, I love to see patients. Every patient is so different, and a lot of them you can help. Some of them you can't, but you try your best. That's not sore there?
No.
Just chew for me. The antibiotic that I give you, because your gums are inflamed a little, may help the biggest problem that you told me afterwards.
Okay.
And that's
my knees have been something wrong with my knee. Thank you, sir.
Right, bye-bye.
After a day of volunteering at the Clearwater Free Clinic, what does 85-year-old Dr. Bob Stubbins want to do? Well, what do you think? Not to make you feel too bad, but 20 years ago, Dr. Stubbins started rollerblading.
I'm addicted to exercise. There's hardly a disease that we know of that isn't benefited by exercise. And I try to push exercise and good eating. Actually, I was so busy up until I was about 50 that I didn't have time to exercise. And I feel a lot better, even at my age, than I did when I was 25. I feel great.
Well, Dr. Bob has gone back home to Canada, but we'll see him again next year. And in good health, of course. Florida. Even the name sounds inviting. With Florida Stories, I'm Larry Ellistons. We'll see you next time on Florida Matters. Major funding for Florida Matters comes from the Mosaic Company, a leading producer of fertilizer made from phosphate, a natural resource found in Florida. America's farmers depend on Florida phosphate for their crop nutrition needs. Mosaic, helping America grow.